instead of spending all of my money, I quickly turned around and said, you know what? I'm going to live on less than I'm spending. I'm going to shift that habit right there. You talk about habits. I'm going to live off $1,000 instead of $3,000. I'm going to live off 1,000. And then I'm going to pay off debt with 1,000. And then I'm going to invest 1,000 a month. So that was how I simply broke down my budget. Very simple way to look at it.
Welcome to the Healthy Investor Podcast with Bob Mastroianni, where you and I will learn from successful real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and other highly driven individuals about their journey and the healthy habits and routines that play an integral part of their growth. All right, welcome back to the Healthy Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Bob Mastroianni. Today I have with me Tony Bradshaw. Tony Bradshaw, Building Future Millionaires. Tony is on a mission to battle poverty by providing financial hope, education, and inspiration. He grew up in a lower income neighborhood in Nashville, Texas. And in his early 20s, he realized he was mismanaging his money and knew something needed to change. That's when he set out to learn how to handle money better. After learning how to handle money at age 25, Tony made his millionaire choice and created his millionaire plan. He accomplished his goal of becoming a millionaire by age 40. Now he's helping everyone he can make the choice and create their own millionaire plan. Tony also has years of financial experience by running businesses developed for Dave Ramsey. When he's not building future millionaires, he enjoys spending time with his wife, 6 kids, and relaxing in his backyard with chickens. All right, Tony, how are you?
I'm doing well, Bob. Thanks for having me on the show. And thanks for moving me to Texas, by the way. I think you said Nashville, Texas. And
Did I say Nashville, Texas?
Nashville, Tennessee. Yeah, you must have Texas on the mind today.
I was actually just in Texas 2 weeks ago. Maybe that is the reason. So yeah, very interesting to me. Would love to talk a little bit about your story. I'm sort of a inner city family, similar background in that, we didn't really talk about money. And I probably in my 20s made every financial mistake that you could make, including blowing up my credit and all of those fun things. And then at some point in life, I realized it was sort of time to grow up and learn a little bit about money, and where that transitioned me to over the last, I would say 20 years has really been a fun ride. But I'd love to hear your story. I'd love to hear how that went for you.
Yeah, man, I grew up in a lower middle income family. I guess you call it middle income back in the day, but lower income, and family didn't really manage money well. As a kid, kids are so resilient. I didn't really realize, we didn't have that much money. As I got older, I saw some of those signs, our power got cut off. That was kind of like a annual thing that would happen. And heating bill, not really well heated house, had ice on the inside window at the kitchen sink. So I would frequently wash dishes and chip ice off the window. And we had kerosene heaters in the house. My dad actually set the house on fire one time because I think he filled it up with gasoline instead of kerosene, and that didn't go over so well. Fortunately, nobody got hurt, but we did lose the arm. Some of the furniture got burnt up a little bit, the arm on the chair and some other things, some blankets and stuff. Carpet too, left some holes in some carpet. So Dad was a little bit embarrassed about that. But yeah, and then water got turned off. And, I remember my mom, water being turned off. She'd come home from work and it's like, hey, I want to take a shower. And Dad would go out with the water key, turn the water back on after it had been shut off. And then after I got big enough, I got trained to do it. And so then I'd get sent out there to turn the water on so that we could use water until the bill could get paid and the water could get cut back on, legally cut back on. Yeah, that was kind of the life growing up. We didn't ever have to, struggle for food. I don't remember, going hungry or anything. I don't think we didn't eat at any posh restaurants, right? Like Red Lobster and Bonanza was probably like 2 of the top tier places for us. I remember a lot of Burger King, a lot of Crystals, and late night runs to Krispy Kreme were kind of like treats for us. But taking those kind of habits, and I don't fault my parents for that. They did really, really well. When I look at what my parents had to deal with growing up, broken families, like lots of alcoholism in both of their families, a lot of horror stories around things that were going on there. My dad dropped out of school in like 10th grade to support himself because he wasn't getting support from his family like he needed to. And then my mom, kind of similar, my grandmother was a single mom raising 5 kids. And my oldest uncle was actually sending money home to my mom when he was off in the military. So to help support my mom and her siblings, and my grandmother, obviously, to help out there because there was no father in the household. He had, done some things that got him kicked out.
Mm.
So I was pretty fortunate that my parents didn't carry all of that baggage into our family growing up, but there was a little bit of that brokenness from, how they had grown up. So they didn't really have a mentor or anybody leading them or guiding them on what to do. And so I picked up some of those bad financial habits. Fortunately for me, I woke up to that pretty early. I wish I'd woken up to that at like age 15 instead of age 25. Right. But at 25, I got my first W-2 out of college and saw that I had made $39,000. And I think prior to that time, the most money I'd ever seen in a year was about $5,000 because, I was a college student and worked summers and worked, some during school. So when I saw that check of $39,000 at W-2, I was like, wow, where did all that freaking money go? Because I didn't have any of it. I had maybe $500 in the bank, and I had a $14,000 loan on a car in the driveway, and about $3,000 in credit card debt where I had bought a computer and some other things. Had a really nice kicking stereo because I knew that if I got married in the future, that my wife was probably going to invest in furniture. And so that meant I should be bringing the electronics. So I bought a lot of, nice TV, nice stereo, nice speakers. And we still have most all of that stuff today. So it's lasted, 24 years of marriage. So I did make a good investment there, but probably not the wisest investment. So, but I took inventory, looked around, and, I had a desk my dad made and a bed that I had made with posts and 2x6s from Home Depot. And not much else, man. That was pretty much it. A computer that I needed for my job because I it was the computer age. And I thought about it. I'm like, man, this is not adding up. Like I made 39 grand and I got 16 grand in debt. Like that's the wrong direction. So that was when I kind of had what I call my financial awakening. And I'm like, this is not how I need to continue my life. Like the way I lived last year can never happen again. I have to do something different. And so I did. And so I went and did what I knew to do, which is if I've got a problem, go learn about the problem, learn how to fix it. Started going to the bookstore, reading a bunch of magazines, subscribed to a bunch of financial magazines. This was like 1996. And then after a very short time, this is what I love about financial education when you put your mind towards something. It didn't take me long to figure out what compound interest was and how to invest and to figure out the debt was my enemy, right? So debt is the enemy of wealth, at least consumer debt is. So instead of spending all of my money, I quickly turned around and said, you know what? I'm going to live on less than I'm spending. I'm going to shift that habit right there. You talk about habits. I'm going to live off $1,000 instead of $3,000. I'm going to live off 1,000. And then I'm going to pay off debt with 1,000. And then I'm going to invest 1,000 a month. So that was how I simply broke down my budget. Very simple way to look at it. And because I was living at home, paying a very small rent, $200 a month in rent, I was able to make that work. And so then within about 18 months, I had gone from being 16 grand in debt, spending all my money, to about $18,000 in investments, and about $18,000 of, had all my debt paid off. And so I was moving in the right direction. Now, unfortunately for me, after I got all my debt paid off, I had been engaged to a young lady and found out she had $20,000 in debt. So I went right from paying off my debt into paying her debt off. And and then that's how that kind of rolled. Then we got married, and the rest is 24 years ago. So.
Wow. So really, really interesting concept for me. And you sort of hit the nail right on the head of, fast forward to today, right? What are people facing with money problems today? And, there's all sort of conversation in the news about inflation. And, we recently went through this phase where people were walking out of jobs to get jobs that paid more money. I feel like W-2 earners are making a lot more money and still have the same problem. And I feel like, fast forward a bit today, and I could think of so many examples and people that I speak with and stories where it's like, okay, wow, now I make $100,000 a year. And the difference between the bank account on January 1st and January 31st, after that $100,000 was earned, and is not much different. So it's like, you talked about $39,000, making $39,000 fresh out of college, and then saying, wait a second, where did all that money go? so I guess this is sort of the next step in the evolution of the conversation is like, okay, so what was that mindset shift? And you talked about doing it in thirds, right? Living off of 1/3, paying down your debt with 1/3, and then investing 1/3. Did you do sort of a spending audit of yourself? Did you sort of figure out, okay, wow, this is really where that money went to?
Yeah, and it was pretty easy to see. I mean, I was just blowing it left and right, eating out every single day.
Mm,
You buying little trinkets. I mean, it's amazing how fast your money goes when you just, especially with Amazon today. Even today, people just, it's like a habit, and it's real easy to go blow $100 a day on stuff that really doesn't matter for your future. And that's $100 a day is $3,000 a month. That's 36 grand a year. So it doesn't sound like a lot of money in one day
mm,
for some people, but that's a huge amount of money. And when you understand the value of time and money, the future value of money, you go, okay, if I'm 30 years old and I spend $1,000, that $1,000, you've got to understand it doubles like every 7 years by the time you're 65. So $1,000 becomes 2 grand, 4 grand, 8 grand, 16 grand, $32,000. So when you spend $1,000 today, you can think of it in future dollars and go, oh, that's $32,000 I just spent today. You could do that with a coffee cup. You could do that with anything, because that's the inflation, but also the investment, right? And so what happens for me, what I happen to do, and this is what I teach, is I don't really want you to manage every penny, because most people are not disciplined enough to manage every penny of their budget. Okay.
mm.
What I try to do is go, you need to make some habitual shifts in the way you think about money and where your money flows. So as soon as your money comes in, if you train yourself to go, I want to put as much of my money into investments as I possibly can. Say, instead of, the typical financial advisor says 15%, which if you're making 50 grand a year, 15% isn't going to create anything of wealth for you. It's not enough. But if you said, you know what, I want to be putting back $20,000 a year into minimum into my wealth building money, then you have a target, right?
Hmm.
And then what I teach is for people to go, okay, let me increase my wealth money bucket to a stretch goal. Let me fill that bucket up, which for most people doesn't exist on their budget, right? So that's the wealth money bucket. And then you try to, hit that number. And I tell people to start with 10 grand that have never done investing before. But once you hit 10, up it, double it to 20 and go, how can I get to 20? Now, if you don't have enough money, doesn't mean you can't get to 20. It means you got to go find some more money. So you got to go and that's where the stretching happens. Because for me, I was making 39 grand. My mom was making 35.
Mm.
And I'm like, crap, I just got here. I'm 25 years old. I'm already making more money than my mom. She's 20 years older than me. Like, I am the king of the hill. I got this game figured out. And then I got my, W-2. And so then it started changing for me. I never realized, as a poor guy from East Nashville. Now, nowadays, East Nashville's like it's like the posh area of Nashville.
Yeah.
Back then, it was like drug dealers all over the place and stuff, right? So I didn't realize that I could be $100,000 a year income earner. I didn't realize I could be a $250,000 a year income earner. I didn't realize I could be a $500,000 a year income earner. That only came after I started investing in myself. So I started with investing in the market, investing in knowledge of investing, but then I also started growing my own self-worth and my own skill sets. And those are some of those habits we talked about earlier, forming these habits up in your life with your time and your money that pay dividends back to you and take you to new places that you never even knew you could get to when you started. And I think those are very powerful things that people got to get their head around.
Yeah. So I believe I may have read it, but I think in some of your information, you talk about the mindset of money. And I think one of your topics, it says how to change your financial mindset and make the millionaire choice. It's interesting in conversation the more I learn about mindset, and I'm actually just reading a book right now by Carol Dweck called Mindset. It talks about the abundance mindset versus the fixed mindset. And I do think that there's a lot around money when it comes to mindset. And I don't know that maybe it's more habit, maybe it's more mindset and understanding. But what do you think are sort of the key indicators that people can work on for their mindset around money?
Yeah, I think the biggest things I see when I coach people and talk to people and just, even in my own family and my kids, right? Because I've got 6 kids and I'm like, how can I instill a millionaire mindset in my kids, abundance mindset? It's just hard, even coming out of my family, because I don't think people naturally think that way
Mhm.
as a habit, right? You have to kind of arrive at it or grow into it. So what I find is that most people don't have a vision for their future. They're just on a gerbil wheel. And that's a repeated cycle. So depending on what family you come from, you're going to get on a different gerbil wheel, right? So if you're on like a family like I was, it was go to work, come home, spend your money, watch TV, or do something else, some other activity. And you just keep on that cycle. That means you're going to repeat that your entire life. If you repeat that for your entire life, then you get to the end and you're like, 70 something years old, still working full time, living off Social Security, and don't have enough investment to actually quit working. It's a bad situation. I had an uncle that was in that situation, and you're trying to pinch pennies, right, to
Mm.
just make ends meet, and then you get hit with 50% inflation in a year because of some bad politics and some bad actors in the marketplace, and then you're screwed because your
Yeah.
fixed income is now it's worth half of what it was just a year ago. That's what we're seeing right now, which you alluded to earlier. So you don't want to be caught in that trap, right? So you want to be kind of making sure that your abilities are increasing. So vision is the number one thing. You have to develop a vision that tells you you're going to end up somewhere different than you are today with the cycle that you're on. Most people don't have that. One thing I love about Dave Ramsey and Dave Ramsey's teaching is he is the best on the planet right now at giving people a different money mindset. Okay, regardless of whether you agree with the mindset he gives them, and he gives them a
Mhm.
debt-free mindset. Most Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 70% of people are living paycheck to paycheck. You can't really think about becoming a millionaire when you're struggling to pay your bills every day or
Sure.
put food on your table. So he helps them get to that first milestone of, hey, I just want my life to be better. I don't want to be financially strapped. I want to be able to pay my bills. My wife's yelling at me because I can't pay my bills. She's stressed out. So how can we get some financial security? So Dave does a really great job of getting people that mindset, helping them shift that mindset and get a vision, which is a vision that they can be debt free. So when people don't have a vision, I encourage them just to borrow a vision, right?
Hmm.
So borrow my vision. I know you can be a millionaire. I did it and I'm nothing special. I came out of a broke family. I was doing broke things. I just decided I didn't want to do that anymore. I learned how not to do it anymore. And then I started putting action behind it. My vision for people is it takes them about 10 years to become a millionaire. It took me 15, but millionaire is really not that special, honestly, with inflation. Like if you had $1,000,000 last year, this year it's worth 500,000 because of inflation, right? That's how bad the inflation is right now, depending on who you talk to. Now, the government
Mm.
tells you it's like 10%, which is just utter ridiculous crap. It's much worse than that. But that's the initial piece. The mindset, the abundance mindset, really follows in suit of that. What I find is when I talk to people and tell them I'm a millionaire, there's a couple things happen. Either they go, "Wow, tell me more about that." The other thing they do is roll their eyes and go, "Oh, you got lucky," you know. And let me tell you, that's the lies, right? It's there's a couple lies that go along with that mindset that keep people from reaching into the millionaire mindset or the abundance mindset, and that's these. I'll never be rich, right? They think that. I don't like the word rich. I'll never live in abundance. Let's say that. That's one that they tell themselves. They also tell themselves, rich people are bad, or people that got that much is bad. It's going to destroy me. All of those things are really about making them feel better or making
Mhm.
excuses on why they're not there. And they're really just lies and are just boundaries that kind of keep them away from abundance. Here's what I like to say. Learn how to make, manage, and multiply your money with a purpose. Because if you got more money, you can help make the world a better place. And let me tell you, there's no shortage of problems that need to be fixed in this world. My wife and I right now are very passionate about fighting human trafficking. There's 45 million people trapped in human trafficking in the world right now. Over 4.5 million sex slaves in the world.
Mm.
That means girls, average age of 14, 98% of them are women. Average age of 14 are forced to have sex 20 to 30 times a day with men they don't know. That's fact. Okay. And we're not talking about that problem like we should be in this world, and it's kind of just slipping away and or just happening right under our noses. When a girl gets sold into human trafficking, she lives an average of about 7 years. So if you get sold into human trafficking at 12, you're most likely have a high likelihood of being dead by the time you're 19. And this is a very common thing. The other thing that's really big deal that we need more good people with money. I like to say if the good people don't have the money, the bad people do. And that's one of the reasons we got all these problems, because the people with the money don't want to fix these problems. So we got to give people who want to fix the problems the money. We got to figure out how to do that, right? And that's putting purpose behind your money. But organ trafficking, that's a real big one, which it's a very dark kind of thing, but that's a big deal. I was just doing some research on that night before last. And the average human body right now, just carved up, is worth about $700,000. That's kidneys, heart, lungs, you name it, on the black market. That's going on today. That's a real thing that's going on. And I know some people that are working to fight that stuff. But that's what I try to do, is instill a mindset in people that when I was trying to build wealth, Bob, between 25 and 40, I was so new at it. I'm just like, man, I'm gonna be a millionaire by age 40 so I can live life however I want to. That was my dream. That was my vision. It's a very simple vision, but it got me moving in the right direction. What changed for me in the last 5 years is I don't have just the knowledge to be wealthy and build wealth. I have a responsibility to build wealth, because we need to fix these problems. These people need help. 147 million orphans in the world. I talked about the sex slaves already, the human trafficking stuff. And hunger. World hunger is like at 900 million, close to 1 billion people. So these are big problems, and it takes a lot of money to fix them. I do think they're fixable things, but we got to think differently about our lives and our finances if we're going to do it together.
I love that you say, make, manage, and what was the third one?
Multiply.
And multiply. All right. Make, manage, and multiply with a purpose. I really like that that you're keen on the idea that you have to create a purpose, and you have to be able to give back, and you have to make a difference in things that are important to you. I love that you spoke about that, because I think that even really ties well back into what you were saying a little bit earlier about what is your vision. And I find that more and more successful people, entrepreneurs, investors that I meet with, that I talk with, that come on the show, those who are really driven become less driven by the actual money and more driven by what they can do with it and what a difference they can make with it. And I think that sort of goes back to the vision, where when we talk about changing mindset, right? What is your mindset around money? Well, when you start to think about what you can do with it, if you start to think about what you can do with it, clearly revolves only around golfing 5 days a week and sitting on the couch and watching TV, that vision could fade a lot easier than, oh, I can use this money to help my church, help people who have hunger issues, help people who are in some sort of other, issue, or make life better for other people around me. I feel like when people really lock into those type of visions with a purpose, then their drive seems to be significantly stronger.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I've done 100 episodes on my own podcast, and I've evolved a lot in my financial mindset just in the last 3 to 5 years, especially around this concept of purpose behind your money. I really didn't have that before. I did good things with my money. I've written big checks for, orphanages, missionaries, churches, stuff like that. But I don't think I actually had a conscious sense of responsibility to build wealth for that purpose. It's almost like, oh, I'm making some money, I should do good things with it. Now I have more of a higher calling, I think, for how I think about money and what I do with it. And it's really changed. Now, what's interesting is, of the 100+ millionaires that I've met and interviewed now, probably only about 10% of them, I would say, thought that way. Right now. About 90% of them are really good people and doing good things with their money, but they hadn't yet transcended into purpose. I'll use a great example. Mitzi Perdue, who was on my show, her dad was a founder of, I'm going to forget the name of the hotel chain. It was a very large hotel chain that got bought out, but had 20,000 employees. But her dad founded that hotel chain, so she was an heiress to that hotel chain. And then later married Frank Perdue of the Perdue chicken family, and Frank built that up to 20,000 employees as well. So she's seen that run in her lifetime up to 20,000 employees in 2 different organizations. And her life's mission, she's a little bit older, I think she's in her 70s or late 70s, but she's made it her life's mission now to fight human trafficking and sex trafficking. So that's where she's gone. But not everybody's there yet.
Mhm.
Um, but you can see it happen, and people hit it at different times. You know, I'm 52. I've only been thinking that way in the last 3 to 4 years. Whereas before I've had money and I did good things with it because I was trained to do that. But I don't think I was trained with this. I had to evolve into a sense of responsibility to know where my money's going as I make it. That's a little bit different.
Yeah, yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting. So I want to transition a little bit. This is the Healthy Investor Podcast, and I'd love to talk to you about, any healthy habits or routines or things that you feel contribute to your success personally and your growth.
Yeah, I think there's a couple that do that. I'll talk about the ones that I think are most relevant. You know, millionaire key number one in my book is you got to have strong character, develop strong character. You need to pay attention to that. Like, you can't build or keep wealth if you don't have strong character. You see a lot of people who make a lot of money, especially in the NFL or professional sports, and then they're broke 3 years after that. And that
Mm.
comes down to character issues a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times. And that's, I really focus on five, which is integrity, self-discipline, responsibility, integrity, responsibility, self-discipline, work ethic, and focus. Those are there's a lot you can focus on, but those are the main ones. So just develop good, healthy habits around doing those things. Okay. So the next one that's really important to me is what I call like time management. So, all of us are born with the same amount of time. What you find, it's a big differentiator between people that build wealth and those that don't, is how they use their time, right?
Mm.
So, if you go home and watch television every day after work for 6 or 7 hours, which the average American watches, I think, 130 hours of television a month. Of course, some of that's replaced by YouTube now, some of that's replaced by social media, but that's a full-time job, and
Yeah.
you're just not going to get ahead doing that. Okay. Now, confession. I was a video game addict from about age 25, into my 30s. I was off and on, in my 30s. My wife and I were battling with it. So, we went through phases where she would freeze my DVDs, my gaming DVDs in the fridge or the freezer, and I'd have to thaw them out to play. We gave them to my father-in-law. He'd come through town. So when he's there, I played, and then I'd give him the disc and he'd leave, and I couldn't play till he came back through town. All kinds of stuff like that to try to break the habit, or at least contain the habit, so I could stay focused on, redeeming my time. But I had a problem with that. So I estimate I probably put in my 20s, 30s, and 40s, probably somewhere between 10 and 20,000 hours of video game time. That's huge. Now, you know the rule, Bob, about
Yeah.
if you spend 10,000 hours doing any
10,000
one
hours,
thing,
right? Yeah.
you're an expert, right? I was a pretty good gamer, right? And I still was able to build wealth, even, misusing my time like I did as a gamer. But when I look at that, go, okay, I'm a multimillionaire, not a decamillionaire yet, but I'm a multimillionaire, mostly in real estate right now. What could I have accomplished if I hadn't misused that much of my time? Now, I still redeemed enough of my time to be successful, but what could I have done if I had become even
Mm.
more hyper focused on productivity? So really, you can invest your money, but you should also look at how you invest your time into things that actually pay dividends for you in the future. And that's a very important thing. I don't think I really understood that at a young age. I do understand that more now, that how you use your time is also going to pay dividends for you in the future. And fortunately, I was able to still do a lot of that, but I could have done better. I think I could have done better. And, movies, I was a movie addict as well. When Netflix first came out, I thought it was my responsibility to watch my Netflix DVDs as soon as they hit my door each day. So when I got home from work, I would pop them in. I think I had 2 or 4 coming in a cycle, and I figured if I watched them and got them in the mail by the next morning, they would be back at my door within 3 days. So I was going through about 2 cycles of Netflix DVDs on 4 DVDs a week. So that's probably 8 DVDs a week that I was popping through when Netflix first came out. And I ran that habit for a while, and then finally, broke off that habit. But yeah, that was my thing, and I'm not proud of it, but I'm trying to teach my kids to do better than I did.
Well, it's interesting. Before I guess around close to age 40, I sort of changed a lot of habits in my life. I'm 47 now. And two of the big habits you sort of touched on. One is I was a late night TV watcher, right? So I would watch TV shows that got over at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. And the mindset that I would tell myself is that I'm not a morning person and I can't wake up in the morning. And when I did my own little time audit of that, I was able to cut some of those hours out, wake up earlier in the morning, start to do some productive things in the morning around reading and getting my mindset right and all of those fun things. The second thing is, I guess around 2016, 2017, I started working from home. And I quickly realized that I cannot put the TV on during the day. And so I sort of made it a rule for myself, because before then, if I was home, the TV was on. If I was in my bedroom, the TV in the bedroom was on. It was just sort of how life was, right? And I decided that if I'm working from home, I can't turn the TV on, because I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to sit on the couch and I'm going to watch it. Well, that has evolved now to the point where, sort of COVID came, right? Now my wife works from home, and that has changed our lifestyle, that now we both work from home. And so she doesn't watch TV during the day either. We don't turn a TV on in our home until 9 o'clock at night. And we put it on basically laying in bed, put a show or two on, and we're asleep within an hour ish. My wife's usually asleep right away, and and I'm usually asleep within an hour. And when I look back on my 30s, 20s, teens, all of those years, and to think that at that time of my life, if I would have done 1 hour of TV a day versus the 6, 7, 8 hours of TV that it may have been on, where could that productivity have gone? What
Yeah.
are other areas where I could have focused that energy and moved those things? And now for me, I watched a football game on Saturday, and it felt like I spent so much time in front of the TV, because I don't sit in front of the TV for a 3-hour stint. That's just not part of my life anymore. So
Yeah. It's an interesting thing that I've kind of come up to, because quite a few years ago, what I realized is how many different things were sucking my time. I call them time sucks. And I really started trying to unwind all that. And what was interesting about that is I pulled one thing out of my life that was currently a time suck. What I found is that the one that I used to have as a time suck would insert itself. So as
mm,
I fixed one thing, another thing would come in. And when I pull that thing out, an older thing would come back in. And it was almost like I was rewinding my life all the way back to my teenage years, and all of these different things that had kind of invaded my life to distract me. And I had to pull them off one at a time and get all the way back. And to finally I go, okay, now I've got a clean slate.
mm,
Now, if I look at my life and go, where do I want to be in 10 years? What am I going to accomplish? What are the habits I want to stack on top of each other to get me to there? And that's the big important thing about mindset and vision, because you go, if I want to have a net worth of $100 million in 10 years, there's a path to get there. Like a lot of people have done it. I've got some young friends that are 35 years old that have net worths over $25 million and like own islands in the British Virgin Islands.
hmm,
Like, I was not that guy, right? I was getting started. Now, that dude started thinking about money when he was 5 or 6 years old. So he became an investor. And so when in his 20s, while I was gaming, I'm older than him,
mhm,
he was actually learning how to invest, and he was back trading the US stock market for 100 years. So, he was learning how to practice, and he developed a
sure.
rule set on how to trade so that he would pull the emotions out of the trading and then stick to a plan and a strategy. So that's a difference between somebody who goes, okay, I'm stacking up a good set of habits. His were all financially based. Now I'm a little bit jealous because I've only known him for a couple of years, but on New Year's Day for the last 2 years, I'm up here in Nashville working or doing something, and he's texting me pictures of the beach rolling in on the British Virgin Islands at his 20,000 square foot resort home on this island. And that's how he spends like the first 2 or 3 weeks of every year now, is down in the British Virgin Islands, because he redeemed his time and
Mhm.
he invested in himself in a way that I didn't do or didn't know to do. And he came from a broke family just like I did. They struggled the same way that I did, the things that I outlined. It's just a different he's arrived at a different place because he's been doing it more intensely for mentally for a longer period of time. So that's the power of, redeeming your time, but stacking those habits up. What I like to do as an exercise, if your listeners are interested in this, and I do this periodically, is I really take a piece of paper, and on the left side of that piece of paper, I list my bad habits. Anything I think is a bad habit, I just list it out. And then what I do is I list out good habits on my right side. And then what I try to do is go, okay, what are the bad habits I have that I need to get rid of that aren't producing anything for me? Like, what are those things? Or what do I need to balance or manage better? TV would be one of those, right? Um, Now, what are the good habits I'm going to build up? Obviously, you mentioned getting up early. That's a habit of successful people. Working out on a daily basis. That's a habit of successful people that actually live longer and healthier lives. Their brain stays smarter. So that's a good one to have on the right side. And watching those habits, and that's a very simple exercise that anybody can go through and really start to shift your life on a scale. And if you do those kinds of things over time, you're gonna end up in a really cool place. It's gonna really transform things, and it's an easy way to get started.
I like that. I like your idea of habit stacking because, just in my mind, I sort of formed a picture, right, of, what habits do we stack on top of each other, and I just sort of pictured almost like a stack of boxes, right? And if the one in the middle is really weak and you stack a strong one on top of it, it's going to crumble. And so I love that idea of habit stacking. And I think I found as I quickly self-reflect upon that, I think I found that as I continue to add newer habits because of the direction that I've changed my life to, where I focus more on healthy habits. I focus on investing. I focus on business and some, success-driven things that when I'm adding new habits in, more often than not, they fall in line with healthier type success habits and better habits for me. So yeah, that's a great concept. I love it.
Yeah.
So
And yeah, and I think it's really important to even think that can happen at any age, right? It doesn't matter how old you are. I think a lot of times older people say I can't build wealth or I can't do certain things. It's amazing how just a little bit of change in your life can create major results quicker than you think. And
mm,
I think, like you said, those habits are part of that process.
great. So I want to be mindful of your time, and I want to transition over to the final segment where we ask the same questions of all of my guests, same three questions. So for you, Tony, what is your definition of success?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked me that. I think at 52, my definition is a lot different than 25. 25, it was, hey, I wasn't even thinking about marriage. It was, let's get to age 40, be a millionaire, and live my life however I want to, off of more money than I'm making now. And I had that number at about $100,000. That's as big as I could think at the time. Now that number is very different because I've hit different goals. My horizons are been broad. I've traveled a lot, so that's expanded my viewpoints. I would say my definition of success right now, um, monetarily, would be being able to use my money to enjoy life, help others, and serve God in some capacity. So that's financially what that would look like for me. I think relation matters a lot more to me now than it
Mm,
did in past years. So I've really worked hard on my marriage. I almost blew my marriage up several years ago, about 10 years ago. And I've been working really hard to make up to my wife. What I tell her, she's had 18 rough years of marriage. I need to give her about another 50 of good ones to make up for the 18 that I gave her that were pretty rough. And so I have a goal of living 100 years old and giving her 50 really solid years of just being spoiled like the woman she needs to be. That's a big one for me. My kids, both my parents grew up in broken homes. So they did really well by me. Like I have no complaints on my parents, but I also felt like I was a better father than my dad. And what I should have been looking at personally was how can I be the best dad I can be and not just be better dad than my dad. So
mm,
I used him as my standard for a long time. And he was a good father. He did not have a father in his life, so he had no model to work from. I did have a model to work from, and I think I in some ways did better, in some ways did worse. But really working on that, like my kids. My first 3 kids were neglected a little bit by me. My last 3 kinda demanded my time, so they kinda got me out of my shell, turned me more into a dad, but those are 2 things I've been working on, and, just for people that are dads and parents, um, a former boss of mine said one time, he's like, "Tony, when you're older, if your kids are okay, the world's good."
hmm,
And that meant a lot to me, and, because when you're older and you're still trying to pick up the pieces because of you worked too much or you neglected your kids or you didn't do a good job parenting, that puts a lot of stress in your life and a lot of sadness. And I saw that with my mom. My mom was very proud uh, of her children and the identity. Her children, she found her identity in her children, which whether that's right or wrong, it's what it was. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but it takes a lot of work. And so
Yeah.
those are things that I would say define my success going into the future.
Great, great. Excellent answers. Thank you. So next question, for someone who's new to investing or even learning to focus on their goals and their path to success, do you have a good book recommendation?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've done 100 podcasts. The one that comes up the most for people that have built wealth is Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad. By far, there's really not even a close second that comes up when I interview people. So I would recommend that people start with that one. Robert focuses mostly on real estate, which is fine. There's dozens of ways to invest in real estate. You don't have to do it the way that Robert does it. I've known people that have invested the way Robert does and got burned by it. So, understand the risks, but it is a good place to, like we talked earlier, start shifting your mindset towards wealth. And that's a great book, probably as good as any to get started with.
Yeah, when you're talking about changing your mindset around money, the cash flow quadrant that he discusses, are you, which side of the cash flow quadrant are you on? That's really mind opening to understand the difference between how your money is taxed as an employee versus as a business owner versus as an investor, and what you can do with your finances, before it's taxed versus the after tax and all that is very, very mind opening. So great recommendation. So before we get on to the final question, again, I want to thank you for coming on. I really appreciate this. Has been a lot of great information. So how can we support you, and then also how could people reach out to you?
Yeah, so I've got a couple places. Right now I'm doing a real big push on my book on Amazon.com. So if somebody wants to go by, pick that up, I'd love for you to pick it up and post a review. So that would help me a lot. That's The Millionaire Choice. Millionaire Not You Can Choose is the name of the book. Outside of that, you can get a lot of free resources at themillionairechoice.com. I actually offer a free life and money mentor session. So if somebody wants to book an appointment with me and spend an hour talking to me about their future and their finances and putting a plan together for their lives, I do that. I set aside 1 hour each day for that, and you can book it for free at themillionairechoice.com. And then, of course, TonyBradshaw.com. There's a lot of stuff at that website as well.
Excellent. Okay, so the final question, if you could think back with me to a young Tony, sort of around the ages of 10 to 12 years old, knowing what you've learned so far on your journey, what are 3 pieces of advice that you would give to the young Tony, or really any pre-teenage child, to help guide them towards success?
Yeah, that's a good one. I knew you were going to ask me one. I didn't expect 3. That's going to be a little harder. I think the first one I would say is, at least in America, realize the opportunities that you have and make the most of them. Like 40% of the world's millionaires live in the United States, but we only have about 3% of the world's population. And so we are exponentially more saturated with millionaires and wealth in the United States. And I don't care if you're rich, poor, whatever, the opportunities are there. I have interviewed the people who have exceeded the hardships. And so everybody in America has the opportunity. Now, whether you seize it, that's up to you. And it doesn't matter where you're born, black, white, red, yellow, whatever color, whatever male, female, the opportunities are there. So make the most of those opportunities. That would be number one. Number two is invest in yourself and grow yourself. That's a big one. You're not going to learn everything in school. Unfortunately, you spend 12 years math, English, and science, but you're really being programmed to be an automaton. You're not really learning the skills you need to be successful in life. And so you need to go outside of that. We just started homeschooling this year. We had them in private school before, and I thought that was good enough. I went to private school growing up. But what I realized is I just neglected my responsibility teaching my children. And so I'm really challenging them to do some things differently and to learn some skills that the school didn't teach them, even in a private school. So that would be another one. Just, do a learning, self-teaching outside of that. And then probably the third one is hang around people that are going to take you to a good destination, right? Because I don't think kids think about that, but I actually did. A lot of the kids in my neighborhood came from broken families, had drug dealers for dads. For some reason, I never got into any of that. I think it's because my parents were much more stable. And so I was very fortunate. but a lot of my friends ended up going off the rails, even in high school and after high school. And I just kept my distance. And so what I didn't do, though, is I kept my distance from people that might get me in trouble. I did not do the best job of surrounding myself with people that were going to high places. And that would be a big deal, I think, for anybody, but especially for kids, is get around people that are going somewhere and then go there with them. They'll help you.
Wow. Excellent. Excellent advice. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Tony Bradshaw. Really appreciate you coming on the show. Make sure you go to Amazon and check out his book, The Millionaire by Choice. Thanks so much for checking in to the Healthy Investor Podcast, and go out there and make it a great day. Thanks so much for joining me on the Healthy Investor Podcast. Check out the show notes for more information about connecting with our guest. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please head on over to iTunes and leave a positive rating and review. It would mean the world to me. I'm grateful for your support, and I wish you an abundance of success on your journey to healthy investments and a healthy life.